Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started now. So welcome to the latest in our monthly customer webinar series, this time working efficiently in the field with ArcGIS Field Maps. To start with, we'll just run through some housekeeping. As always, the webinar today is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be shared with you in the follow-up email sent after the webinar has finished. Also in that follow-up email will be a few links to some useful resources, which will reference what we run through today, some of the content, some of the tools, etc. So do check them out. There will be a Q&A at the end of today's session. You can submit questions at any time though using Slido. You can access that with the QR code on screen right now, or use the URL and the event code on screen. Do chuck in your questions as we go, and we'll try our best to answer as many as we can towards the end. There will also be a few polls in Slido. They'll become live towards the end of the webinar. It's always useful to get your feedback, know how we can keep improving these. So yeah, please do take the time to fill out those polls as well and leave your thoughts. Bringing you the webinar today is myself, Richard Janokis, and we also have Helena here, a graduate GIS consultant who we'll meet later as she starts to run through some of the technical content we have for today's webinar. As I've said, today's webinar is all about working efficiently in the field, and in the ArcGIS system, we have a whole suite of mobile apps designed to help us do just that. Now, you might be really familiar with some of these already and perhaps use them every day, or perhaps you're hearing these for the very first time and are new to this world. Either way, it's really valuable to be aware of the different offerings and the different capabilities that each one provides. For example, ArcGIS Quick Capture here in the top left provides a big button configuration for rapid observation-based collection of your location data. Survey 123, in contrast, is a more form-centric experience, one that allows you to provide your users with an easy to scroll through survey form designed by you for whatever needs they have. Suite for ArcGIS is a more rule-based editing format for using data collection in the field. It allows you to adhere to QA processes as you go and collect that data correct at the first time of asking. And in the spotlight today is ArcGIS Field Maps, our map-centric solution, which allows you to see your location in real time, navigate to your key data points, and then collect data quickly and efficiently as you do so. In ArcGIS Field Maps, you can capture all sorts of data, whether that's a point or a line or a polygon. All of that's available in ArcGIS Field Maps. Through the use of smart forms, there's a logic built into ArcGIS Field Maps designed and configured by you, which means that you give your users an intuitive and efficient data collection experience, only providing them with the information that they need at any given time. Working remotely isn't a problem, as you can take ArcGIS Field Maps offline, configure it to do so, and still have all the same data capture capabilities and functionality you would at any other time. Location sharing works in real time, meaning that you can stream your location to other users in your organization. Maybe you need to be monitored for health and safety purposes. The user has the freedom to turn this on and off as they need. And you can even receive location-based alerts based on your real-world location, meaning important information is delivered straight to a mobile device based on where you are. And the different types of data that you can consume in ArcGIS Field Maps can go to the complex end of the scale as well, with utility network support, and even an indoor mapping system can be consumed in ArcGIS Field Maps. The possibilities are really quite endless. And hopefully that's reflected in the 2023 roadmap I'm just flashing up on screen, which shows how a lot of the capabilities continue to be improved as we go multiple times throughout the year. All of these changes, developments, and improvements were made just in the last calendar year, and this is sure to continue as we move into 2024. What we're going to be focusing on today, though, is how you can edit in ArcGIS Field Maps and edit with control, how Field Maps designers can control that level of editing for their users, meaning that they only get the capability that they need, further making their experience that more efficient. It might be common to assume that by default, everyone can edit all of the data they're presented with in ArcGIS Field Maps, but sometimes that isn't necessarily needed or required. Sometimes perhaps you only need a read-only access, meaning people can view their data, query their data, navigate to it, but not make any changes. Perhaps they only want to edit the attributes, the underlying data that sits below those data points, being able to update your data without changing any of the shapes or positions. Or conversely, maybe it's the geometries that they only need to edit. Whatever experience they need, whatever level of editing they need, that can go all the way up to full editing access, and you can control that on a user-by-user basis. We're now going to start to run through some of these experiences, some of these examples, and with that, I'd like to pass over to Helena. Hi, Helena.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for that introduction. So today I'm going to be taking you through two of our scenarios. Now, the first one I'm going to be taking you through is our read-only access. So in this scenario, I'm going to be an ecologist, and I've got a roster of protected bat roosts in Regent's Park. Now, as you can see in the map on the right-hand side, I have two layers within my map. I have my polygon layer, which is separating the park into different fields, and then I have my points layer, which represent my bat roosts. Now, in this scenario, I actually don't need to be able to change any of the location of my roosts. I don't need to change their geometries and any of their attributes. I just need to be able to see where they are, and I also need to be able to get directions directly to them. So in this scenario, I would also like to be able to make notes on the map without editing any of the underlying data. So the solution for this is to create a map with read-only access. And now I'm going to walk you through how you do this in ArcGIS Online. So if we go down and we switch to here, this is my web map in ArcGIS Online. And as you can see, I have my two layers down here. Now, our first step to setting up read-only access is to click on your points layer here. And we're going to set this up actually in the settings for each layer in the map. Now, if you go along at the top and you hit on the settings tab here, we're going to scroll down until we get to our feature layer. As you can see, we have a few options for editing here, and I'm going to click enable editing. When that happens, you can see all the different options you have. So you can add, you can delete, you can update, but also like Richard mentioned earlier, you can do attributes only or attributes and both geometry. However, we don't want any editing enabled for this. So we're going to click that off and keep it as editing disabled. And then you would go down and you would save that here. Now, you're going to need to repeat that for each layer within your map if you do not want editing to be enabled. Right, now I'm going to move to showing you how this is set up in Field Maps. So we're going to go up here. So this is our overview page once you open your web map into Field Maps. As you can see on the left-hand side, we have a few different options, such as your forms and your geofences. We're not going to go through those now as they're not relevant to read-only access, and we will go through them a little bit later on in this webinar. So one of the capabilities I would like to talk about is our offline access. So this is a really great feature, and it means that if you have mobile workers in areas where maybe they don't have internet or they don't have any kind of connectivity, you can enable them to take that web map offline in Field Maps. They can make all their changes, anything they need to do, and then they can re-upload that once they get connectivity again. However, as you can see, I have not set this up to be offline supported, and there's a few different processes you'll have to do in order to do that. So I'm going to move on to sharing. So we actually need very little configuration for this map because of the fact it's read-only. But one thing you need to do is you need to decide your sharing level. So right now I haven't shared this, but if I want to push this out to my organization, I'm going to click on set sharing level. And then once this appears, I'm going to hit organization and then I'll click save. And what this means is that anyone in my organization who can log into Field Maps on their mobile application can now access this map. Additionally, we have a couple sharing options here. So you can either share it with a link, which you can just copy using this button, or you could scan a QR code. So we have a couple options just to make it as easy as possible to share this for you. So now that we've got our map configured in both ArcGIS Online and now in Field Maps, I'm going to show you what this looks like in the Field Maps application on your mobile. So with this, I've recorded a little demo. So when you first open Field Maps, what you'll see is your list of your Field Maps right here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to press play. Now I'll go in and I'll select my read-only bat roost map. Now, the first thing you'll see is I'm on the other side of London. Let's say I was doing a survey in a different park and I need directions to my bat roosts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, I'm going to select my bat roost. We'll just click on that point and then click the number 19. And I'm just going to hit this direction button at the bottom. This immediately is going to use the native mapping application that's on your phone to create the fastest route to your roost or your asset. So now I'm going to go back into my field maps. Now let's say I want to mark that this was the roost that I got my directions to specifically. I'm going to go up and I'm going to click mark up and I'm going to draw a circle around this point. And then I'm just going to switch it to a bit of a nicer color. So we'll go with some blue here. And then that way I can see directly which point exactly I got my directions to. But let's say later on you're using your map and you don't want to necessarily see that markup that you've drawn. You can just go to layers and just flick that on and off as needed. And so that is how you're going to set up a read-only access field maps for your field workers. Now we're going to move on to our second scenario. So what if you want full editing access? Now in this scenario, I'm an arborist and I'm leading a team to survey all of the trees in both Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens in London. I'm going to need full editing access to delete any new trees or add new trees or update existing ones. And as you can see, I've got those two different parks highlighted in different colors. So that darker polygon is Kensington Gardens and that lighter polygon is Hyde Park. Now, because I'm going to have a team all working in different places, I need a digital survey to standardize the data collection so that they're all working in unison no matter their location. And then in this survey, I would like it to auto-populate the location field based on where they are. And for this, we're going to use that underlying polygon for the parks in order to do this. So the solution for this is to create a full editing access map. Now I'm going to show you how you do this, first of all, in ArcGIS Online. So we're going to look at our web map, which we pre-prepared. Now I have two layers in this. I have my trees layer and I have the boundary for the parks. Now the park boundary, I actually want to keep as no editing enabled because I do not want my surveyors editing the park boundaries. I only want them to be editing the trees. So we're going to click on our trees layer here. And this is essentially the same process as I showed you before, except this time we're going to want to make sure that that box is ticked and all kind of editing is enabled because we want full access. So that's adding, deleting, updating, and also for both attributes and geometry. And then you would just go down and you would hit save there. So now that we've got that set up, what do we do in field maps to build this? So we go in here, we've got our overview page, and this time we're going to go to our forms. Now, if you haven't seen or used smart forms before, this is our way for you to build digital forms and to standardize your data collection in the field for your mobile workers. As you can see immediately, we've got some date and time questions, we've got the species of the tree, and I'm just going to show you how we build this out. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see some of our basic questions that you might just want to add into any kind of survey. And it's a really easy to use drag and drop interface. So to add that date and time, all you do is select it here and then drag it into your form. It's that easy and you don't need to use any code to configure this. Let's delete that now so we don't have a duplicate. So one of the great aspects that I really like about field maps is the fact that not only do you have the option to add basic questions, but you can drag in any of the fields from your underlying map. So for this, we've dragged in species, crown, and size. So let's say I delete species, you'll see it immediately appears back here. And I can just drag that in if I need it again. But let's say you want to go a little bit further for your forms. Now I'm going to show you how you can do that with just a little bit of conditional formatting. So for this question here, for this box, it says conditional symbol here and then visible. Now what does that mean? What this means is that I've set this up so this box for the description of damage to the tree will only show if this question above is set to yes. So I'll show you how we do that. So as you can see, we've got the visible sign here. I'm just going to save this map so we can go into it. And all you need to do is scroll down. We're going to hit the settings button and we're going to take a look at that conditional formatting. So what's really great about this is you have the option for conditional formatting to set this up in SQL or Arcade, if you're familiar with that. And as you can see with the SQL formatting, it's very easy. It's just a drop down to select which field you want. And then I already clicked damage and I want is equal to yes. And that's how easy it is to set that up. Now, if we're going to go a little bit further and we're going to look at that auto population that I mentioned before, we're going to take a look at location. And as you can see, this is read only, which means that your surveyors are not going to be inputting in the cell. This is going to be auto populated. So I'm just going to go down and I'm going to show you how we do this. So we've got a calculated expression here, and I'm just going to open this up. Now, this is actually using Arcade. Now, Arcade, if you haven't seen this before, is a lightweight expression language that was developed by Esri for Esri products. And it's geospatial enabled, which means that it's compatible with all of your geospatial data, as long as it's within the Esri system. Now for this, I've only used 7 lines of script, so just 2 variables and 1 if statement, to set it up so that the location will auto-populate. So as you can see in the first line, I've pulled in our park boundary layer and I've selected name. Now this variable, all it does is say, if I'm intersecting with the park boundary, please pull through the name of which park I'm in. So it's very easy to set that up. And then to show you as well for the surveyor ID, if you want to know who's doing what survey, this is a really good way to set that up. So again, it's read only and it's calculated using Arcade as well. So let me show you how simple this expression can be. This is just 1 line, which just says get user, full name, and then you have the full ID of the person who's doing the survey. And that's a really good, easy way for you to just automate your workflows and save a bit of time when you're working in the field. So now that we've got our digital form set up, what does this look like in the front end? So I've got 2 videos here, which I'm going to show you. The first is adding a new feature, and then the second is updating an existing feature. So if we click play on this, as you can see, I'm in Hyde Park and I'm having a look around. I'm looking at my trees and I need to record a tree that maybe wasn't recorded before. It's just been planted. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to click my tree layer and I'm going to start filling in the questions. So first we've got our date and time, which let's go for this, the 8th of February. We're going to put in our tree ID. Then we're going to move to our species. This is a lovely oak tree that we're going with today. And then we're going to put in our crown size, the diameter of the tree. And then what you'll see here is we have our damage question. And I'm just going to highlight right now that you can't see that box for the description of damage yet, because that's the conditional formatting we discussed before. However, if I go in and I set damage to yes, that box is now going to appear for you and we can describe the damage. Let's say it was vandalism to the tree. And as you can see here at the bottom, the location immediately auto-populates with Hyde Park because it's pulling that location data from the underlying boundaries that I've set before. And then as well, you can just see the surveyor ID has auto-populated with my name. And so you don't even need to bother filling those in. So that's a really great feature. So now if we move to updating an existing feature, so we've got that tree that was misrecorded in the pond. This time we're in Kensington Gardens, and all you have to do is click on that point. We're going to select that, and we're going to go down and we're going to go edit. And with this, all we're going to do is drag this to the correct location, and then click update point. And we're not going to fill out the survey again, but I'm just going to highlight to you that this time it's immediately auto-populated with the correct location because it now knows we're in Kensington Gardens, and again, it's auto-populated with the surveyor ID. So that is how you can set up a field map with full editing access and to use a little bit of Arcade just to auto-populate your smart forms. All right, Richard, you're now going to show us scenario number 3.
Perfect. Thanks, Helena. Cool. I think that's coming through. So yes, moving on to scenario 3 now, which as Helena has said, will be a different type of editing and a different type of editing control for your users, this time focusing on editing attributes only. For this scenario, for this example, our user in question is a network asset inspector for a utilities organization. They will work with complex network data like you can see here on the right hand side, with lots of points, lots of data and lots of assets to work with. Crucially, under this role, they need to be able to edit the underlying data associated with each point. They need to navigate to that asset. They need to update the information associated with it. But what's really important here is that they don't need to actually change any of the geometries or the locations of this data. These are things that are fixed in the ground, so that they won't want to move them or accidentally make a change that won't be recognized by everyone else in the organization. Also, they'll want some location-based alerts to keep them informed about where they are when they're in the right area for conducting their work, in the right site survey area, as well as what risks might be around them. So they're constantly aware for a health and safety purpose that they're doing their job safely and to the best that they can. The solution here is to configure the data editing to be edit attributes only, but also to set up some geofences that will allow us to receive those location-based alerts. For anyone unfamiliar with geofences, I like to think of them as a sort of virtual perimeter around a physical location. And as a person moves through this virtual perimeter in the real world, they can get triggers, alerts, or have their experience change based on where they are in that real world, thanks to the geofence being in place. So let's put all of this together and see what this looks like by switching into ArcGIS Online. We first of all start here in the map viewer, where we can see our data. We can see our fairly complex network data. We have the chambers on which we're going to conduct our surveys. We have our site survey boundary. And as we zoom in, we can also see that there's actually some ordnance survey data in here as well. We have some master map data showing the exact boundaries and perimeters of different buildings, as well as the address-based points that will provide us important UPRN and address data. Data like this from Ordnance Survey can be really valuable and can add a lot to your map and to your work. This is all available via our content team here at Esri UK, and there will be some resources in the follow-up email about that data specifically if that's something that you're interested in. So like I said before, it's the chamber surveys that we want to conduct our inspections on, that we want to edit the data for, but crucially not change their position. So if I go to the item details page for this data, and actually go to the settings, just as Helena did before, we can scroll down and see where we can change these. Now, I just want to tick on attributes only because that's all I want to change on this occasion. I'm also going to remove the ability to delete so that no one can, by mistake, accidentally delete a data point and then struggle to put it back in, and click Save. Now, back in the map viewer, what I do want to highlight is that for any layer in question, you can actually select it here and then go to Forms in the tool menu here on the right-hand side. And this lets you configure the smart form for that layer right here in the map viewer. Now, hopefully the first thing you recognize is that you get the exact same experience as you do in the Field Maps Designer, as Helena showed before. So there's parity there. We can set up a barcode scanner question that will use the camera. We can set questions to be read only and also calculate fields so they automatically complete, as well as set some conditional visibility as Helena did before. So there's complete parity there between the Field Map Designer and what we get here in the map viewer. But the reason you might want to do this is that first of all, it saves you time. Once you create this form and save it to that layer, it's associated with that layer going forward. So should you use that layer for multiple projects, maybe you use it in multiple maps, that form will carry through and constantly be there for you to use time and time again. And what I'll show now is that when we go into the Field Maps Designer and choose the map in question, we'll see it automatically opens on forms, and the form that's created in the map viewer is there for us straight away. So we've saved loads of time by not having to duplicate that work and create the form again. So because our form's already created, I'm actually just going to go straight to the Geofences tab here on the left. So we can create those location-based alerts as I described before. Now we have one already configured here for us based on the survey site. And what you'll hopefully see on the right-hand side is that the builder experience for creating this survey site is actually quite simple, quite basic, and therefore easy to use, right? So we just need to set the name of the geofence in question, choose the layer from a drop-down list that we want our geofence to be based on, and then select the action that we want our geofence to carry out for us. And on this occasion, I'm going to have a location alert so that when I enter the area, a certain message is displayed on the mobile device, and when I exit, I get, again, a similar message that I can write and customize however I like. Thinking about further customization though, and something Helena showed earlier was the use of Arcade, and we can edit the Arcade here to further customize the message that we get, and also when they're triggered, in case you want a really specific customized experience for your user. So if I actually remove this, open the clipboard, and just choose this example here for some Arcade code that will show how we can further customize our geofences. What this code is saying is that, first of all, this custom message will display. It's going to reference some of the feature layers in my map as well, in my data, which is a nice feature to carry through. And rather than just being active all the time, I'm actually going to configure this geofence so it's only active between 9 AM and 5 PM. And by having that start and end time, maybe that reflects a shift pattern or just normal working hours for this project. That means that, again, that users get in a more intuitive experience. They're only going to receive these alerts to their mobile device during relevant times, and it's one less thing for them to think about or be concerned with. So I just hit done and save, and that geofence is there for me. I'm actually going to configure a second geofence to show, again, how you can further customize this. So by clicking add geofence, I'm going to insert the name, and this is going to be all about risk zones and being aware of where we are spatially and how our health and safety is going to be looked after as a result. The layer I'm going to choose is our health and safety risk zones, which are these three here indicated on the map. But what I actually really like about the Field Maps designer and these geofences is that you can filter that layer further based on the attributes, based on the fields in that layer. So here I have a field for risk level. Some are high, some are low, and I don't necessarily want a geofence for every single health and safety risk zone that I've identified. Maybe I only want it to focus on those high risk level zones. So I can apply that filter and click done, meaning, again, our user isn't going to be bombarded with alerts as they move around this study area. They're only going to get them at an appropriate time when the risk is high. I can change the action type to location sharing instead of location alert, and choose whether this starts on enter and stops on exit, or vice versa, starting on enter and exit, sorry, and starting on exit. So what that just means is when we enter that geofence, our location sharing can turn on. When we leave that geofence, our location sharing can turn off. It doesn't have to be on all the time. Our field workers don't need to feel like they're constantly streaming their location, but instead only do so at the appropriate times, and without them having to action anything either. They can just have this happen automatically thanks to our geofence. So I'll save that, and now that we have our geofences configured, I'm going to switch back to our slides and show you the mobile experience of how this actually works and what this looks like for our end user. So we're going to start by launching the map in question, Field Maps. It asks us to enable our location sharing and asks us to set the duration. Maybe that reflects, again, a shift pattern, how long you want that to happen for. And eventually we launch into our map, which shows our location and where we are in respect to those geofences. So as our field user starts to locate themselves, navigate themselves, and become familiar with their surroundings using Field Maps, they'll move into that first geofence, and you'll see that first alert pop up on screen that they've entered the geofence we configured initially. So that's that location alert element coming into play. That's worked for us nice and easy, and now our field worker knows, okay, I'm in the right area, I'm in our study area. Now they enter the next geofence, and we see another alert here, so that tracks will be saved. So we've entered that high risk zone, and now our second type of alert, the location sharing, has become active. Our user now can rest assured that they know they're in a high risk zone, they know they need to be more alert, and that's come straight to their mobile device. So once they get to the chamber that they want to survey, we can select it, we can open up that form and start editing. And what you'll notice first is no matter how hard this user tries to pick that point, choose that asset, no matter how much they zoom in and try and click on it, they can't actually pick it up, they can't move it, they can't change the shape, and that's because we changed that editing. So instead, we'll switch right into the form. What you'll notice here, as Helena showed too, we have that sort of autofill experience. So one less thing for that user to think about when filling out this form, further making it more efficient. They can just crack on with completing the survey and collecting all the information that's important to them at this time, rather than having to overthink about what information they need to capture and how they can get this right. The smart form makes this nice and easy for them to capture that important information, including the ability to maybe take a photo, use the camera on your device and take a photo at any time. Attach that to your survey. And once you've captured all that information, you can hit save and know that that's committed to that point and you've carried out your survey successfully. So now I'm just going to skip forward a bit in the video to when we reach our geofence moving away from the site now. And as we pass over, you'll see that, again, we get a location alert pop up on our phone, warning us that we're actually leaving the study area. So the location alerts we set up, the geofencing that we're using here has worked in both ways, worked entering, exiting an area, and the notification straight to your mobile device means that your field user doesn't have to constantly be thinking about these things. Instead, we've made their experience nice and efficient for them. So we've run through there 3 different scenarios that show 3 different ways of how the editing control in ArcGIS Field Maps can be controlled. That it allows you to give your users a nice intuitive experience where they only have the capability that they need at any given time, so they don't have to worry about how they use the app. It's all laid out for them nice and easy. As I mentioned at the beginning, Field Maps is just one app in our whole suite of mobile apps in the ArcGIS system. They all offer very different capability, and therefore when you might use them differs quite a lot as well. And there's great value in recognizing this and knowing when you might want to apply these different solutions to, again, give your users the best experience. In the resources email we send after this webinar, there will be a link to a presentation from our annual conference from last year, where we run through exactly this. In 20 to 40 minutes, we run through all these different apps, when they might be used and why you might use each one in a different situation. So do check that out, as I'm sure that'll be really useful. The last thing I want to flag and point you towards is our next webinar, which will be happening next month. This will be the first in our ArcGIS update series that occurs throughout the year. So for spring 2024, this will highlight lots of new functionality and capability that's added in the ArcGIS update that takes place this spring. So if you can, please do attend that. If you can register and access the recording afterwards, please do, because that's always a really useful and valuable session. And with that, that brings to an end our webinar for today and our content for today. So we'll now move on to our Q&A session. You can continue adding questions to Slido. There's already been so many questions, so thank you for that. Please log on to Slido using the QR code or the URL, enter that event code and contribute any questions you have at this stage. Also, the polls should now be active in Slido. So as I said at the beginning, please do provide your feedback. It's really valuable. We always really appreciate it. And that's something we can definitely take away and continue to improve these for you. So please use the polls to provide your feedback. And with that, I'll welcome back Helena and we'll move on to our Q&A.
Great, thank you, Richard. So let's take a look at our Q&A questions. So it looks like the top one here is there a limit to how many people can contribute to a layer at once in ArcGIS Field Maps? So personally, I have never come into a limit with how many people can contribute to a layer at once in ArcGIS Field Maps. I think where you might come into difficulty with this is if you're taking that layer offline. That is something you need to think about and then syncing that once you have connectivity again. But Richard, do you have any further information on this?
Yeah, sure. I think it's fair to say that the editing in field maps and almost with a lot of the data in ArcGIS works on a whoever edited sort of last through the door gets that sort of overwrite and editing in that way. So you're absolutely right. If you take something offline, those changes won't be recorded until you sync back with your online environment. If you have lots of people using the same field map at any one time, whoever makes the last change will be the one that's most reflected. So I guess there needs to be an element of coordination there, but between your team to make sure you know who's conducting that last edit. This actually somewhat links to another question I did see about validating changes, tracking inspection changes, and versions of data. And that's one way to help, I guess, get around this. In ArcGIS Online, when creating your data initially, when you see the item details page, etc., you can create views of your data and have multiple versions of your data in ArcGIS Online. And a clever thing you can do is configure the same map but with different versions of the same data, right? Creating different views so that maybe you have that field edit copy of your data that then gets validated before it moves through to your master version of the data. And by creating different views in ArcGIS for your data, that's a really clever way to get around the issue that first question might be addressing in terms of multiple users trying to edit the same data at the same time. So look up the creating views in ArcGIS Online. I think that might be a really good workaround for tracking those inspections over time, as well as having multiple users edit at the same time. There were some questions I did see which I think were dropped in towards the beginning and hopefully were answered as we went along, which is what we always aim to do ideally. So there were some questions about using location sharing and using that with a geofence or a polygon to alert yourselves to where you are. Hopefully we touched on that one, as well as we just touched on the sort of multiple editing and controlling editing in that way. Going to keep looking because there's so many questions here. There's one here about, can you link Survey 123 to field maps? And the short answer is yes, this certainly can be done. The way you configure your data and configure your items in ArcGIS again to talk to each other means that you can absolutely link field maps to Survey 123, jump from one app to the other using those links. If you have the link to your survey in your item details in your attribute table, for example, you can absolutely just link straight out to that. And that actually brings us on to a similar question about workforce and integrating with another one of our apps, ArcGIS Workforce and ArcGIS Field Maps. The question was, is it correct that field maps will replace workforce at some point? And the short answer to that is yes, that is the plan, that is on the roadmap, and as I'm sure you're aware, maybe it has been on the roadmap for some time. It's correct that that's something we at Esri are working towards, and that the capabilities of ArcGIS Workforce absolutely will be integrated into field maps. The current messaging is that this might not happen at least through 2024. For the remainder of this calendar year, we'll see Workforce as a separate supported app that you can use and link out into field maps. There is integration there where when in Workforce, you can have that field map sort of button towards the bottom of your screen and again link straight into the field maps app. So for now, they work together, they integrate together. You do need both apps on your mobile device, and maybe into 2025, we'll see the capability of Workforce straight into the field maps app.
One of the questions I've seen at the top here is, can you give third-party access to this to edit? Imagining an outside company would be surveying the trees. So one of the things that we would need to discuss here is our licensing for each user. So each user who uses field maps needs to have a mobile worker license. So if everyone in this third-party company had a mobile worker license, yes, they would be able to edit your field map as long as you made it publicly accessible, even if they were in a different organization. But they would need to have that Esri license for the mobile worker in order to be able to access that. Because each time you go into field maps, you do need to sign in. So you do need to have an account.
There's a question here with a lot of uplights about the plan to make smart forms carry over when creating a new layer based on an existing one. That was hopefully somewhat showed with the way you can set those forms up in the map viewer, and that's then committed to that layer. So should you use that layer time and time again, that form will also be carried over. So the question references sort of the time consumption of having to create different site maps and layers. Hopefully that shows that that can be a big time saver there by doing it in the map viewer initially. Also, if you're replicating a layer, if you're creating views on that layer, again, if you save that form to that sort of master version of the layer, you should see all that carry through. So hopefully, as the question references, that will be a big time saver.
I'm seeing here one of the questions is it possible to export added markup out of field maps to either Excel or as a shapefile or geodatabase? So not in those formats. So you can share it within the ArcGIS system as a image, or you can share it as the raw markup file. But right now, there is not the capability to share it as a shapefile or in Excel.
There's a question here about does field map forms fields automatically pick up attribute domains set up in the geodatabase, and hopefully that was somewhat shown, especially in the arcade I showed in the third scenario. But absolutely, you can reference your feature layers, references those fields in those features when using arcade, so it can pick up all that information and carry that through automatically, making your scripts more intuitive, but then also presenting those field names to your users if that's how you want to work. And also, I referenced that question. There's actually one just above it as well about whether ArcGIS Field Maps is for ArcGIS Online only, or whether that can also be used in Enterprise. And the short answer is absolutely yes, it can. You can use Field Maps just as any other of our mobile apps and a lot of our software in Enterprise too. It's just that sort of still named user add-on license, or if you have that mobile worker, they can access Field Maps no problem. In my experience, one thing to just be aware of is that if your enterprise is self-deployed and you have behind firewalls and things like that, your mobile device then needs to be able to talk through that firewall, right? And so when setting up your workforce's mobile devices, making sure they can communicate with your portal and communicate with enterprise in order to receive data, submit data, there's just that extra level of intricacy to be aware of when configuring it compared to ArcGIS Online.
Okay, so I'm seeing here a question about whether field maps is on ArcGIS only, ArcGIS Online only, and whether or not it can be figured for Enterprise. So you absolutely can have field maps on Enterprise, and this can be added on, and it's fully compatible and completely made to be on both ArcGIS Online and Enterprise. And then I'm seeing a couple other questions down here. Is it possible to have multiple answer questions? Yes, it is. So to select multiple answers. Yes, we can do that. And then I saw another one questioning whether it's possible to publish directly from ArcGIS Pro into field maps and to bypass ArcGIS Online. So this is not possible in the fact that you can't bypass ArcGIS Online, because when you publish from ArcGIS Pro, you're publishing this as a hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Online. And because Field Maps is a web-based browser application, you do have to access this through ArcGIS Online in order to get access to those layers. So it's not possible to go directly just from Pro to Field Maps. You do need ArcGIS Online as well.
There's a licensing question here about whether you can use ArcGIS Field Maps with an ArcGIS Pro license, or do we need a separate license? And in most cases, the answer will be yes, because you're likely licensing ArcGIS Pro via what we call an ArcGIS Online GIS Professional license. That by default, uses ArcGIS Online, gives you that creator user in ArcGIS Online, and with that creator user gives you access to things like ArcGIS Field Maps and Survey 123. So if you're that pro user in ArcGIS Online or Enterprise via a GIS Professional, then absolutely you can still access Field Maps as well. If you're licensing ArcGIS Pro via the older ArcGIS desktop model, then it depends on whether you're utilizing the ArcGIS Online seat that comes with that license too, because as Helena just referenced, the online element is crucial here to be able to access and configure ArcGIS Field Maps. The one thing I will just add on that is the ability to location share, and that location sharing capability comes via either the mobile worker license by default or sometimes if you're using a creator or a GIS professional, you actually need a location sharing add-on. So it's just an extra add-on license for that location sharing capability for licensing that isn't the mobile worker. If that's something you're interested in, or if you need clarification, it's well worth reaching out to us, reaching out to your named contact here at Esri UK, who can absolutely help you answer that question a bit further on your specific setup. Right, just looking through a few more. There are so many questions. We really appreciate that, and hopefully you're continuing to take the time to go through the polls as well and provide that feedback. I think we might just do one or two more questions looking at the time, so we'll try and pick out some good ones. I'm seeing one here about whether geofencing works for offline editing, and there's no reason that won't work. It's all configured, as I say, in the Field Maps designer beforehand. You then set your map up to work offline, so it downloads, when you're in Field Maps, you download that offline working, offline map package almost. The geofence is a feature service, a feature layer within that map, so that will all carry through, and then it works based on your mobile GPS. So it's location based in that sense rather than an online based system. So hopefully that should work for you. It's worth giving it a try, but configuring your map to work offline will download that map package, which brings a lot of that functionality with you.
Well, unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our time here, but if you go through some of the questions, our team has gone through and written some answers to them. So if you can have a look through those when you get the chance to. We've done as many answers as we can, and we really appreciate that people have taken the time to write in your questions today.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for coming along. Hopefully we found that session really useful. The resources email will be sent out pretty soon afterwards, so do check all of that out. Reminders to join us next time, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.